I'd like to welcome you to our Debunking the Traceability Myths webcast, brought to you live from Bluebell, Pennsylvania. I'm Karen Langhauser, Chief Editor of Food Manufacturing Magazine and Associate Editor of Chem.info. One step back, one step forward traceability is not only required by regulatory bodies, but lack of traceability is a potential deal breaker with customers. Offering customers safety and peace of mind is crucial in today's environment. Responsible processors are striving to put measures in place to reduce risks and save lives. Today's webcast will separate fact from fiction, investigating the difficulties of achieving true traceability throughout the entire production process and exploring the business case for traceability. Before we get started, I'd like to explain how you can be part of this webcast. Polling questions throughout the program will help us customize our presentation to your needs. When the polling box pops up, simply click on the answer of your choice. Results will appear, giving you the audience response. As we proceed with our discussion, if you should have any questions for our panelists, simply enter them into the Ask a Question box on your media player and then hit Submit. We will have a Q&A session after the panelists' presentations where we will try to address as many questions as possible. However, if we do not get to your question during our one-hour event, you will receive an email response after the broadcast. Now I'd like to introduce our panelists. Joining me in the studio are Tom Deeb, Director of Food Safety for ASI Food Safety, Kathy Noor, Vice President of Microsoft Dynamics for Tektura, and David Griffin, Vice President of Technical Services for Dairy House. Tom Deeb is an executive consultant for ASI, focusing on helping clients comply with international food safety requirements and improving supply chain quality, safety, and security. Mr. Deeb is also a visiting professor at Michigan State University, where he teaches compliance to private sector and international standards, including traceability. In addition to his work in food safety, Dr. Deeb is involved in pandemic preparedness by helping governments and companies prepare for the possible spread of avian influenza. He is a member of the U.S. Technical Advisory Group for ISO 22000 and AG 9000 and is the author of several publications and patents. Kathy Noor is responsible for driving the Microsoft Dynamics NAV practice for Tektura North America. Kathy possesses 15 years of industry experience with demonstrated expertise in product direction and multinational financial management. Kathy has been nominated multiple times for the Michigan Women in Business Award, and her vision and drive helped earn Tektura the #1 Microsoft Dynamics NAV Practice Award for North America for 5 consecutive years. David Griffin is responsible for overseeing Dairy House's research, quality, and supply chain departments. David helped integrate the Microsoft Dynamics NAV system into 4 of International Group's 5 business units. Prior to his work for Dairy House, David served as the Vice President of Production for Custom Industries USA and also as Director of Quality and Research. If you would like to view more detailed biographical information on each speaker, you can click on the Speaker Info tab on your media player. Before we get started with our presentations, let's send out our first polling question to the audience. How strongly do you feel that your current system can meet the FDA's information retrieval and 24-hour delivery requirements? Very strongly, strongly, maybe, not sure, haven't thought about it. While we wait for the results, let's hear from our first panelist, Tom Deeb, Director of Food Safety for ASI Food Safety. Tom?
Thank you, Karen. Today we're going to talk about the Bio Terrorism Act. We're going to start out with an explanation of the Act, what the requirements are, and what the responsibilities are of the various parties within the food chain relative to the Act. One of the common themes within all traceability systems is to not only have traceability, but to have transparency. The Bioterrorism Act is only one instance of regulatory action that requires traceability. We see traceability growing as a common requirement for both public and private sector regulations as well as standards. So one of the things that we have to know is, what does it really mean? And basically, traceability is being able to trace a material from farm to fork. It includes transportation, includes the processor's distribution, retail, sales, quick service restaurants, etc. An example would be if we looked at pickled vegetables, pretty common product, one that's readily available. If you look at it from a traceability standpoint, we want to know where the materials came from, how they got there, from whom the materials came from, and also where they went. Some of the materials that you don't always think about, for example, are water. Where did the water come from? Did it come from a municipal supply? Did it come from a well? How did it get there? Where are the packaging materials from, especially the materials that touch the product itself? So as you look at pickled vegetables, it's not only being able to trace the vegetables, but it's all the materials that are in there. Now, the Bioterrorism Preparedness Response Act came about in the year 2001. It was in response to September 11th. It covers all food and pet food products. It involves the transportation and importation companies. It's a one-up, one-back traceability. That means if you're a food processor, you need to know who your materials went to and who you got your materials from. There are three parts to the regulation. The first one dealt with registration. By now, all food processing or food handling entities should have registered with the FDA. In addition, if you're importing products into the United States, your importer and the customer sending you materials have to file prior notice. And that's been in place now for over a year. And this year, at the end of 2005 and now the end of 2006, the records retention portion now has become mandatory. It's a requirement for only U.S. operations, and that's what we're going to be talking about here. Failure to comply can lead to everything from product holds at the border to product destruction, fines, and ultimately it may lead to federal criminal action. The products that are covered basically look at it as anything that can be eaten by a human or by an animal. So it's food and food additives for man and animal, as I said. Dietary supplements, infant formula, beverages, including alcoholic products, all fruits and vegetables, dairy products and eggs, canned foods, live animals, obviously, even snack foods. So gum, candy, are covered under this law. The companies that must comply, if you look at our food chain from farm to fork, basically everyone involved with food handling, food processing, or transportation is covered under this act. So it's manufacturing, processing, your transportation companies, distribution centers, receiving, holding, or importing. There are some exemptions that are listed here. For example, farms are exempt from this law. Restaurants, things that sell directly to consumers. Non-processing fish vessels. What that means there is if you're out fishing, you don't have to register for the act. Samples, materials for personal consumption, and also the USDA has similar requirements, so therefore meat and poultry are not covered under the Bioterrorism Act directly. As you look at it as a processor, so what areas are covered in your processing operations? Well, all of your suppliers are covered. Inbound transportation, in other words, the way the products are received, whether it has to be by rail, by boat, by car, or even by truck. Receiving, finished product. Receiving customer information, so your customers, how did it get to your clients? And obviously transportation is a part of that. You'll notice that in here there's one area that's not specifically covered, and that's during your manufacturing process. The government assumed you had traceability from once you received it all the way through your process, and that is implied throughout the law. Standard information requirements. The most difficult thing here is not the fact that you need information. In fact, you have all the information required. You have the company names and addresses for your suppliers and your customers. You have product names, product descriptions, lot numbers, quality, quantity, packaging, materials. All that information is within your system and processes today. You can't run your business without it. Unfortunately, that information is scattered throughout your organization. It's contained in contracts, receiving receipts, shipping receipts, transportation, mandatory warehousing certificates, bill of records, etc. So throughout your system today, you have all the information the FDA requires. The real trick is, when there's a recall and they ask for it, can you deliver it to them within the required time? The specific requirements on records. If you're doing perishable materials like fresh fruit and vegetables, you must maintain these records for 6 months. For semi-perishable materials, 12 months, and for shelf-stable products like canned beans, it's 24 months. As I said, you already have the records and information today. The real trick is, when the government asks for it, they want you to deliver it to them in the format they want it in less than 24 hours. They really expect you to be able to deliver it in 2 to 3 hours if you're a large company. That you have the systems in place and they really want those records quickly. For smaller companies, they recognize that this may be a more difficult process, and therefore they're going to give you some more time. But again, it's within 24 hours. These must be delivered in a format they can use.